Warhammer Imperium, issues 71 to 80, painted. And most importantly, the son of the Emperor, Rabuta Gilliman, finally arrives. Hello and welcome to The Lucky Roll, an eclectic channel for eclectic games. And today we're going to be doing issues 71 to 80 of Hachette's Warhammer 40k Imperium magazine. Now these are 10 very interesting issues. Originally the series was supposed to finish at issue 80, but because the magazine has proven to be so popular, they've actually extended it onto another 10 issues. So this is not the last episode of Warhammer Imperium, possibly the second last, because we will also be doing the last 10 issues of the Warhammer Imperium magazine. But I digress. Issues 71 and 72 give you 5 Lichguard minis. So we'll just have a quick look at the issues and then we'll look at the minis themselves. So issue 71, of course, starts off with Lichguard, which are the guardians of the nobility. So they're kind of high-ranking Necrons. Now what's interesting about these is there's two ways to build them. You can build them with kind of two-handed lances, and you can build them with shields. Now, I did a bit of both, as you'll see in a little bit, but anyway, we'll carry on with the magazine. So there's a battle record for your Lichguard. There it talks about the Age of the Dark Imperium, which would have been 9th edition. It goes into aspects of chaos rising and the safety of ignorance, so it's not really a nice thing. The Imperium is not a nice place to live. It goes into the Black Templars and some of the heroes of Space Marines. So, of course, you've got Helbrecht, and you also have Merrick Grimaldus. Now, you can actually find it on YouTube. There is called Hell's Reach, and it's his story, and it's a kind of a fan-made movie, but it's animated from the audiobook, and it is an incredible watch. It's you can see the whole thing on YouTube. Just look up Hell's Reach, and it tells you all the story of Marek Grimaldus, and it is an amazing watch. It's all kind of pencil colors, and the audiobook is just amazing. An incredible thing. I shouldn't be advertising other videos on YouTube, but I am. It's something that's well worth checking out after this video. Check out Hell's Reach and Grimaldus and watch that. It's like a 2-hour audiobook, but it is amazing. You have a short story here called The Emperor's Justice, which goes into nice details, and you see everything about the Black Templars. It goes into the incident at Arbeth 4, and it goes into kind of some of the rogue traders. So you can see some of the rogue traders here. Different other kind of characters, like you've got the Drukhari Raiders, you've got the Witches, the Homunculi, you've got the Orc Freebooters, which are basically Orc pirates, which are... they're just fun. If you wanted to be space pirates, you've got the freebooters. You've got traders and renegades. You've got the Aldari Corsairs. So these are kind of very nautical, piratey type of thing. And you have a Captain Sloan here as well, who would be a kind of a rogue trader. It goes into some details about specific Necron characters. So you've got Orican, the diviner, who can kind of tell the future. And you have Anraker, the traveler. It has the how to build guide for the Lichguard. Now, what was interesting about this is it has a variant. So as you can see here, you can also do it with the shield, or you can do it with just the two-handed lances. And I did it for both. You have a new War in the Dark kind of mission status. And that was issue 71. Now, issue 72 came with the other half of the Lichguard sprues. So it's 5 minis, was spread out over 2 issues. It starts off with Zandrek, who will be kind of a very high-ranking Necron again. It goes into another character called Illuminar Caesaras. It goes into Azrael, who will be the Supreme Grand Master of the Dark Angel. So there's a lot of lore in these 2 issues. You have Lazarus, who will be the Master of the 5th Company, again from the Dark Angels. And it goes you into some pretty cool kind of other figures, like Space Marine flyers. So you got Storm Talon gunships and Storm Raven gunships and other cool little things like that. You've got the Interceptor here. You've got the Storm Wolf, which is kind of unique to the Space Wolves. And you've got the Ravenwing Dark Talon, which is also an excellent looking flyer. You have some speeders. Now, these are actually quite old. We painted and built this for the Warhammer Conquest video, which is all of the 80 issues of Warhammer Conquest, all built and painted, but the speeder was one of them. And unfortunately, the mold lines are a bit... It's an old model, so it didn't go together as well as I would have liked. But nevertheless, it's a cool-looking thing. And these are the more modern speeders. So this is kind of the more newer models, bigger, beefier, chunkier ones. So you've got the Hammer Strike, the Thunder Strike, and the Hail Strike. Some more stories about the festering hordes, and it gives you how to paint the guide for the Lich Guard. It goes into some more rules for the Adeptus Sororitas with warlord traits. It gives you the data sheets for the Lich Guard, a new tutorial, and a new scenario called Locating the Gate. So let's have a look at the actual Lich Guard themselves. Now, these things, like I said, can be built two ways. You can build it with the lance. So I opted to kind of give the leader the two-handed lance just to kind of set him out a little bit, and you can do it with the shield variant. Now, I had to do the shield variant because the shield just looks way too cool. I mean, I don't even know if these are the more meta version of it, but this is certainly... I'd nearly say it's nearly worth buying the magazine twice so you could have a version of either. But this is the two-handed lance, and this is, again, the shield. Now, I love this particular one because it's kind of, there's a touch of come and have a go if you think you're hard enough. They were simple enough to put together, simple enough to paint. I would, of course, paint the shield before I attach it to the mini. Like, great variety here. I mean, I just love the fact that it's a kind of a one-handed cleaver lance thing that you can kind of chop anything that comes near you. And the shield itself, it just looked too good to not put it on the models. I have a spare shield, but I was going to kind of do a bit of both, but after I did the lance, I did the shield, and I did the rest of them with the shields because they were just, like I said, they were just too cool looking. I love the look of them. I mean, even this one, it's very kind of, I know he's moving, but it's a very kind of sinister look that the sword is there literally to go and chop you over the shield itself. They were very simple to paint, very quick, very easy. So they're cool looking models that don't require that much effort. And even this guy, I mean, I love the fact that the sword, it's like a backhanded swipe with the sword. The shield is out. There's great dynamic poses with these. So, like I said, you have the option between the two-handed lance and the shield. I obviously went for the shields, but yeah, no, I have to say, really liked it, and the shield is what stole the show for me. Issue 73 comes with one mini, which is a Locust Heavy Destroyer, and he's a big kind of chunky thing. I thought he'd be a little bit bigger, but nevertheless he's still quite a presence on the battlefield. So of course this issue goes into some detail about him. Basically, he's a sentient weapons platform, so he's all guns, as you can see from the big huge one there in the front. It also goes in, of course, the battle record, so if you want to kind of basically name it or do other little bits and pieces to characterize it. It goes into some aspects of the Blood Angels. So this is Commander Dante. He'd be the leader of the Blood Angels. I think he's possibly the oldest living space marine. It also goes into another one called Gabriel Seth, who would be kind of an offshoot of the Blood Angels called the Flesh Tearers. And the Blood Angels are famous for their rage. These guys are the angriest of the angry guys. It goes into the fifth sphere of expansion, so some extra lore there. It talks briefly about the Gene Stealer cultists, so it also goes into how the Tau are kind of emerging into the fifth sphere of expansion as well, and it gives you some cool kind of details on the battle suits that the Tau have, from the small one all the way up to the big ones there. Nice sense of scale. It has, of course, the usual build and paint guide, but it also has, as well as painting your Locust Heavy Destroyer, it has how to touch up your previous models. So, I mean, such as the Lieutenant helmets, the Sisters, and even the old Librarian, which you got way, way back. And it also touches up on some of the Mechanicus, and also even the Pallid Witch flesh for the Pallid minis, which are for the Flayed One minis that you had way back as well. It goes into painting face details, and it also has the Locust Heavy Destroyers. So this is the actual data sheet for the mini you get, and of course the mission for it is called Grinding Advance. This is the mini itself. I thought he'd be bigger, but I think that's just more me not managing my expectations very well. But otherwise, quite cool. I mean, he's a big, beefy, chunky lad, like, and he's just like the weapon is nearly the size of him. But it was a fun build, very easy to paint. It has that nice kind of like he's floating. It gives that nice impression. It's connected here at the back next to the rock, but it hides it quite well. So he does have this kind of in-flight motion that he has going forward. Yeah, it was a fun, simple build. Because he's nice and big, he's not that hard to actually paint. And of course he's multi-limbed, so he's like, the gun is so heavy he needs 4 arms to actually carry it. And yeah, it's just, he's a big, huge, beefy, beat up, chunky boy, and I'm sure he's going to be fairly nasty on the battlefield. So I mean, he's got a comically small head as well in comparison to the rest of his body. So just to give you a bit of a scale sense, this is your standard Necron, and this is the Locust Heavy Destroyer. So that's why I thought he was a little bit bigger, given the actual image in the front, but he's not. Nevertheless, it was a cool model to make and a cool model to put together, and one I'm looking forward to fielding immensely. Issue 74 comes with the Firestrike servo turret, which was, well, it's something I always wanted to kind of build because they looked kind of cool the first time I saw it. The issue itself is interesting. Of course, it goes into the details on the Firestrike servo turret, but it also goes into some details about Khorne. And there's a short story here about the fall of Dominor, where the legions of Khorne are basically being unleashed on the Blood Angels. A cool, short little story, a few pages long. It goes into some details on the Chaos Demons that accompany Khorne. So Khorne will be the Chaos deity of rage and wrath. So they have some really cool looking models and lore. As you can see here, like one of them is the Juggernauts, which is like a big mounted beast that'll bite you if you go anywhere near it. But also it shows the internal enmity. So Khorne gets... I think Khorne is the most powerful of the Chaos gods, but the other 3 gods constantly try and undermine him. It goes into some lore about the Space Wolves. So you've got the Ulrich the Slayer, which would be a wolf high priest. And you've got Bjorn the Fell-Handed, who will be the last of the company of Russ. So he's basically the oldest Space Wolf in the warrior in the oldest warrior in the Imperium, save for Rebute Gilliman. So, fair enough. I thought it was Dante. I didn't realize it was actually Bjorn the Fell-Handed. You also have how to build Servo Strike turrets, so it's the usual build and paint guide. It was straightforward enough. You also have a build option, so depending, you can have the autocannon or you can have the normal turrets. You have, of course, the build, paint, you have the data, the lore. So you have the Twin Accelerator autocannon or the Twiz Las Talon. So it's, depending on what you want, you have 2 different variants. And the mission, of course, is called The Legion's Rise and Surprise Attack. As for the mini itself, it was fun to build, a little finicky. I shouldn't say finicky, but I had to be careful in assembling it because it did seem to kind of need to click a little bit. But nevertheless, it's a really cool looking turret, a really cool looking gun, and it's just basically something that can kind of pin down the whole field. Be careful with the feet as well, because I did find it kind of hard to press them into the actual base of the turret, but nevertheless, it's a cool looking model, a really nice looking mini. It's a deviation as well because he's a tech marine specifically. He's kind of painted in red with just blue shoulder pauldrons, and as you can see here, you have the Mechanicus symbol on his shoulder. But yeah, it was just fun to paint, simple to paint, a fun, simple, cool little build, and I'd nearly buy 2 or 3 of them if you were kind of forming a defensive plan, or if you wanted to kind of do an awful lot of kind of fire suppression on vehicles or large squads of infantry. I mean, this thing does one job, and that is shooting. So that is the servo turret. That is the Firestrike servo turret, and yeah, a cool little mini that I was quite happy to build. Now, issue 75 comes with a terrain kit, which was a hemotrope reactor. Now, it's kind of a running joke between myself and my friends that I have so many Hemotrope reactors because I collected Warhammer Conquest. I got 2 of them, and 2 of them are also included with Warhammer Imperium. So I was actually dreading sitting down to paint what would be my 4th one. However, the paint guide in this actually surprised me, and I'll show you when we get to it. We'll have a look at the issue first though. So as you can see here, it focuses on the Leagues of Votann, which would be the newest faction in Warhammer 40k. Basically, they're like space dwarfs. They're an offshoot of humans, but they're very technologically advanced, and there could be some very interesting stories with them in the future, because they harbour a lot of technology that the Mechanicus would not only covet, they also have artificial intelligence, which was a big no-no in the Imperium. So there's a lot of potential clashes with this new faction going forward. Very interesting kind of models. So of course it goes into some details here about the actual Leagues of Votann. It also goes into some details about the Chaos Demons of Nurgle. Now, if you want to know more about Nurgle, please do check our Warhammer Conquest video, which I'm sure James will put the link somewhere, maybe up here, or maybe it's just going to be down in the description. But it goes over basically Nurgle's Space Marines and some of his own actual demons as well. So it'd be focusing on the Death Guard, but nevertheless, they're cool. The really horrible, really scary, rotten, disgusting kind of Space Marines that are just infested. It goes into some of the different things here. So you can see you've got the Plague Bearers, you've got Nurglings, you've got the Heralds of Nurgle, and the Great Unclean One, which is just one big huge blob that eats everything. It goes into the War Zone of Darovar, and it also goes into kind of Harkin World Claimer, who's the Herald of the Apocalypse, and you've got House Mandracore. So that's a Titan. Some of the big Titans are actually traitors to the Imperium. So there was good Imperium Titans and bad Imperium Titans. This guy is one of the bad ones. You have a story here, An Obstacle to Acquisition. So this is a cool little story because it's actually about, or includes, the Leagues of Votann. So, if, like myself, you're hungry for lore about the Leagues of Votann, this is a nice little touch that you can kind of get to know a little bit more about them in a nice bite-sized chunk. You have, of course, the How to Build Hemotrope Reactor and the How to Paint Hemotrope Reactor. Now, this is probably the first time that I actually followed the paint guide, because it gave you an idea on how to do a kind of an old beat-up looking one. Now, it also gives you an idea on how to paint the other one that you had, but I loved the actual look of the beat-up one. It was something I hadn't tried before, so it told you to put things like Astro Granite on different parts of the model and then kind of dry brush over it. It goes also into the campaign is called Repel Borders, but looking at the actual model itself, this was the original one I had, so this is the kind of the paint style I was doing, and I wasn't really looking forward to doing it for my 4th one. But that paint guide in the issue actually impressed me so much I had to try it. So I followed the guide, and I actually came up with this really beat up, kind of horrible, rusted, weathered, torn kind of Hemotrope reactor, and I really enjoyed it. I'm a fairly conservative painter. I'm not the most imaginative person, but so I kind of follow the guides fairly closely. But this is the first time I kind of went out of my comfort zone significantly, and because it's a terrain piece that I have so many of, I wasn't all that worried if I botched the job. And I just love the way it came out. I mean, this is a terrain style that I'm going to be doing for a lot more of bits and pieces of terrain that I have going forward, because I just like the way it looks windblown and destroyed and rotten. Its case basically Chaos Black, and I just dry brushed lead belcher all over the model to pick up most of it. These bits are just the Astro Granite turf, and I put Agrax Earthshade over it, and it just kind of looks like worn, corroded, nasty, mouldy, manky kind of dirt on the model, and I love the way it kind of came out, and it looked just disgusting. I gave it a dry brush of Ryza Rust as well, but you can also do it with some Troll Slayer Orange, just to kind of give it that rusted, worn look. And the other great thing about it was, I think it looks great, but also it was really quick to do. this was a very quick paint job and a very pleasurable paint job. So this issue for the paint guide alone, for me, was worth it. Now, like I said, this is my fourth one of these, but it has already become my favorite one, just from what I learned from painting in that particular issue. Now, issue 76 comes with the Space Marine ATV, the kind of the scout car of it. Now, when it first came out, a lot of people kind of thought it was funny that it was very kind of Mario Kart-esque, and it is a little Mario Kart-esque, but I actually quite like it. I mean, it's a small, fast little buggy with a big Gatling gun on top of it. So, I mean, you know, it's nimble, it's quick, it's powerful, and it was actually great fun to build. But nevertheless, this is what you get with issue 76. It's also known as an Invader ATV swift-moving scout unit. So you've got 2 Space Marines on what is, basically a little buggy. It goes into Chaos Demons of Tzeentch. So Tzeentch should be kind of the magical planning type of chaos god, but it goes into nice detail about his horrors. The Heralds of Tzeentch and the Lords of Change. So Tzeentch would kind of manipulate and change these forces. The horrors in particular are fun because if you kill a pink horror, it turns into 2 blue horrors. If you kill a blue horror, it turns into 2 little yellow horrors. And I used to love assaulting my friends' armies with these things because it was like whack-a-mole. They just kept coming. You have no matter how many of them you killed, but you have Lieutenant Neos. So basically, he is a member of the Silver Templars. And you have Lampros Hecaton, who's also a member of the Silver Templars. You have the War Zone, which is called the Sanctus Wall. It gives you a little bit of information around it as well, and it has the how to build guide and Invader ATVs. Now, there's actually a friend of mine called Patrick who bought, I think, 30 copies of this particular issue, because where he works, and he works at a really cool job, but I won't say what it is, as part of a team building exercise, he wanted to do a Mario Kart. So he kind of got every member of his team one of these little issues to build and paint and do as they want. So it was quite amusing. The news agent even spoke to me about Patrick, saying that they couldn't believe that he ordered 30 issues, and that even the supplier couldn't believe that he ordered 30 issues, but nevertheless, he got 30 issues, and his team is very lucky to have him. But it's basically, just the Invader ATV squad, like I said, is a kind of a small, quick, mobile little strike unit that's very fast. And you have, of course, the mission is called Control Nodes. And as for the mini itself, I quite liked it. Now, obviously, you've got different weapon options. I went for the Melta instead of the Gatling gun because I wanted this to kind of harass harass armor rather than kind of infantry. But yeah, I have to say, I quite enjoyed painting it. It's a cool little thing. I mean, I know it is very kind of go-karty Mario Kart, but nevertheless, I like it. And I'm probably going to get a couple more of these because I love the idea of having a fast, mobile strike force that can tear armor apart with big meltaguns. So yeah, it was pretty cool. You have the Space Marine here standing in the back, of course. He's got his bolt pistol, and you have the driver here in the front that fits quite nicely, and his little kind of cross shield. You have the little lights here, so yeah, again, very go-karty, but it was easy to build, easy to paint. It was quite a quick little thing, and yeah, I just like it. I don't care if people think it looks a bit naff or a bit silly, that like you have flying space tanks and kind of demonic monsters, and then you see boys drive by in a little go-kart with a gun on top of it. It reminds me of the phrase, if it's stupid and it works, it's not stupid. And to be honest with you, I can see this being a great, nifty little unit for my army. So that was the issue 76 of Imperium magazine, the ATV buggy. Issue 77 and 78 are again a 2-part sprue issue, so you get the Necron Command Barge. Now, it's a pretty cool, nifty looking piece of kit. Basically, you have the commander of the army and it's his own personal barge, but even if you want, you can put him on foot. And replace him with two big, huge kind of cannons. So it's a multi-build kit, so if you wanted to save money, you could buy these issues twice and build one of each. It also goes into some details about the Eldari Harlequins. Now, the Eldari, of course, are basically the elves in space. The Harlequins are kind of scary looking things, but it goes into kind of different details about them. It goes into the war zone of Obolus and Lyrak, and it also goes into a nice short story about the Eldari as well and their Harlequins, the story called, naturally enough, The Last Laugh. You have some more information on heroes of the Imperium. So you've got Najal Stormcaller, who's a High Rune priest for the Space Wolves, and you have Lucas the Trickster, who's the Jackal Wolf. But he's kind of famous and infamous. You have the How to Build Battle Barge. Now, one thing I will say is that it doesn't tell you how to build the big cannons, but it does tell you how to build the actual battle barge itself. It's not the easiest build, so I would be careful about it. And one thing I would warn you about as well is make sure you don't flip this part upside down, because I made a mistake with that I glued it the wrong way around. It flipped somehow when I was doing my work, and I didn't notice it until I was trying to assemble more, so I had to carefully separate it and put it back. So be very careful that you have the correct side up here, so that 69 is actually placed on top. So if I were you, before, as you trim it, what I normally do if I wanted to make sure I have pieces kept separately is I'll write the actual number. So I put 69 on top and 70 in the bottom, or just write top and bottom on them, so that when you're painting them later, you can obviously naturally enough paint over it. But do be careful, because it nearly ruined the model when I glued the wrong side up with this particular base plate. But nevertheless, it was a cool little model, a difficult build, but at this stage you should be quite good at it, given how many issues we've gone through. You have, of course, Breach the Bastion, which is the actual mission. It has some extra victory points here, and you also have a really cool little pull-out, Battle in the Eldari System, The Spoils of War, which kind of opens up into kind of a nice little bit of information. That's kind of a cool little thing to add to your magazine. Issue 78, of course, is the second half of the Battle Command Barge, and it goes into the Chaos Demons. So the good thing about these issues, of course, is it gives you a little bit more lore. And the Chaos Demons here, of course, are Slaanesh, which would be kind of the god of pleasure and excess and things that are kind of not safe for work. So you have different things like the Heralds of Slaanesh, you have the Demonettes, the Keeper of Secrets, and it goes, of course, into a little story about these actual demons, which would be kind of lust and pride and kind of, how do I put it? You wouldn't want to wake up next to that thing in the morning, is all I'll say. You have, of course, how to paint the actual Catacomb Command Barge, and because there's a lot to it, there is a fair bit to the actual paint guide. Nevertheless, you have a lot of paints as well, and it does come out quite well. You have the data, of course, here for the Command Barge, but like I said, you can actually build it separately, where the commander is separate, and instead of him, there's just a big, huge kind of cannon. So it's your own choice, whatever you want to do with it. You have, of course, Into the Breach and a tutorial on how to use it, and the battle for this mission is called Battle in the Tomb. Now, as for the Command Barge itself, I have to say, I was, aside from this bit, which I glued upside down, I was quite happy with it. It's a cool looking model. You know, it's definitely a centerpiece. It's something that stands out, and it looks very well, but it is fiddly to put together, and be careful when you're doing it. And like I said, don't mix this base plate up, because you might nearly break the model tearing it apart to do it. But yeah, it's a fun little model. The other thing I will say is these guys were extremely difficult to balance and put together correctly. It could have been me messing up putting it up, but I found that they stooped quite a lot, and I had to kind of click them up into their little seats. So the consoles here that they're working on, for example, their hands are actually underneath it. So it's like I said, you should be well experienced at building at this stage, but nevertheless, be careful and wary with this one, because it's a very nice piece, but it is very finicky. Even these bits here, it wasn't 100% certain in the guide as to how far up or down or what way they go. But they look like, of course, the actual boosters or the thing that gives it motion. But nevertheless, a cool little model. But yeah, be careful when you're building it. Otherwise, you might have to go out and buy another one. But yep, there's two variants. So I think it also came with the little standee. So if you wanted to put him up separately, you can, and just put a big, huge Gauss cannon there instead. I gave the Gauss cannon to my friend Tony, who's actually an orc player. So he was absolutely delighted because orky things can be made and built out of anything or looted from anything. So basically, his orcs just looted my poor Necrons when they weren't looking and ran off with the commander's massive Gauss cannon. But nevertheless, it's a cool little centerpiece for your Necron army. And aside from it being a finicky build, it looks class and it is definitely worth it. So, issues 79 and 80 come with the most interesting model in the whole collection, which is, of course, Roboute Guilliman, the leader of the Ultramarines and the leader of the Imperium. The sword that he has here is literally the Emperor's sword. It was given to him as a mark of the Emperor's blessing for his authority when he returned. He is basically a powerhouse and was the only living loyalist Primarch that was still there. Now, fortunately, 10th edition of 40k is coming out, and Games Workshop have announced that another Primarch called the Lion will be out soon. But nevertheless, if you can't wait for the Lion, you can always build Guilliman, and it's, of course, the issue is predominantly about him. It goes into his different gear. So he's wearing the Armor of Fate, which is basically, it has a life support machine on its back to keep him alive. And you have the Emperor's Sword and, of course, the Hand of Dominion, which is basically a power fist. It just goes into his details. It goes into a new war zone, phase 2 of the war zone, Obelisk and Lyriac. It also goes into a kind of a cool little Inquisition report on rogue traders. So it's an interesting kind of short story in that it gives you the synapses or the little snippets, I should say, of what happened, where it happened, and it reads kind of like a file report. As you can see here, it gives the impression that you're going through files. So I thought it was a cool way of telling the little story, but it goes into basically the cost of vengeance onto this particular rogue trader. You have the how to build guide. Now, of course, Guilliman comes with a head and with a helmet. It's up to yourself what way you want to paint it. He's not desperately hard to build. He fits together very well, but it recommends that you do sub-assemblies before you start painting him, and I would agree with this because there is a lot of finicky little bits that would be impossible to get a brush into if you didn't kind of do painting in sub-assemblies. You have, of course, assaulting the gate. So the mission is called the Hammer Blow, which is a veteran mission at this stage. And, of course, issue 80, which was going to be the last issue of Warhammer Imperium, but they've gone on for another 10 issues. As you can see, issue 81 here is a Paragon Warsuit. It has, of course, the other half of Guilliman and is predominantly a paint issue. So it's a paint issue that's worth looking at because there is a lot of painting in this character, especially with the Emperor's sword. It does go into some detail on his face, so if you do want to try and brave painting a Primarch's face, it gives you options on how to do that. It also tells you how to paint the old helmet as well. So it's whatever you are more comfortable with, because this is obviously going to be the center point of your Space Marine army, and it also tells you how to paint his base. So it's a fairly comprehensive paint guide, and it does go into different aspects like flames as well. You have, of course, his data sheets, and you have the completed painted model. And, of course, the last mission is Dolmen's Gate, which is basically a jewel beneath the gate, which 100 power for your two massive armies. So let's have a look at Guilliman himself. Now, he's quite an intimidating paint, because obviously of the stature of the character, but also, you know, how intricate he is. I mean, the gold in the armor, you'll have to be patient with it, because this guy's bling. He's got gold absolutely everywhere, and it kind of snakes into cool little kind of patterns. The base is really nice. I quite enjoyed doing the base, and he's standing on top of an Alpha Legionary or Alpha Legion kind of Chaos Space Marine there, who came off worse for Gilliman. You've got two aspects of white, so you've got the Ultramarine symbol here on the shoulder and here on the knee, and you've also got the 13th Legion on his belt buckle. So if, like me, that you're allergic to the color white, it can be intimidating enough because it stands out an awful lot in the model. It was a fun build. Now that I have him, I'm delighted, but also be careful because I did drop him and this bounced off, and I'm lucky it didn't break. It broke at the part where I'd Luden connected, so be careful when you're transporting him. But nevertheless, the Emperor's Sword, I was quite happy how it came out. What I did was I spray painted it white, and there was this stuff called Evangelion Yellow, which I basically, it's kind of one of those contrast paints, and it gave it the nice yellow shade, which was the base of it. Then there was Glyph-Found and Fuegan Orange that kind of gave the orange parts, and you can kind of touch it up a little bit of red, and you put tiny little black dots here, and the edge here, which you can't quite see, but it does make a lot of difference. It's like an edge highlight is just Dorn yellow. But I was quite happy with the sword. As for the rest of Gilliman, I'm an average painter, and this was the best I could get him to my ability. I've seen people kind of do layers on every single little intricate part of the armor, but it was just too much for me. There wasn't enough hours in the day. I've heard of people spending up to 60 hours on Gilliman painting him. This for me, I think, was 3 nights work, so I suppose I would have spent maybe 10 hours on him. But nevertheless, he is the centerpiece of your army. He's a kick-ass Primarch, and he's what comes in issue 79 and 80, and is pretty much the penultimate Space Marine and pretty much leader of the Imperium. So this is everything you get from issues 71 to 80 of Warhammer Imperium. You get some really nice things. The servo turret, the Locust Heavy Destroyer, the Command Barge, the Lich Guard, the cool little Mario Kart buggy, Gilliman himself, and what was, well, an old school terrain piece. If I had to pick a favorite, it would probably be, I'd say, the Lich Guard. I know it seems a mad thing to kind of pick the Lich Guard, but it was the shields that did it for me. I just love these shields, and the whole kind of space Egyptian thing looks really cool with them like that. A close second would be, would you believe it, this model. Even though I've so many of them, the paint guide in this particular issue actually grew me as a painter and made me go outside my comfort zone. And like I said, I was very happy with what was an issue I was dreading. It was going to just be a chore to do. It actually turned out to be a labor of love and something I'm very happy with. Of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Gilliman himself, but he was actually, as silly as it was, he was kind of a stress paint because he's such an iconic figure. I was terrified about messing him up, and he costs about 50 euros if you mess him up. But he is obviously the best looking figure here, along with possibly the Command Barge. But no, for me, if I had to pick, it's actually the Lich Guard with the shields, because I just did not expect him to come with such cool looking shields. So that's everything from issue 71 to 80. Thanks very much for watching us, and stay tuned as we don't finish it here. There's an extra 10 issues for Warhammer Imperium, and the next one I think is going to be a Paragon Warsuit. So the sisters, who we said goodbye to ages ago, are actually back with some pretty kick-ass Dreadnought style suits. So until next time, this is Sean from The Lucky Roll. As always, if you enjoy these videos, please like, subscribe, all that good YouTube stuff. And until next time, good luck, God bless, and stay safe.